My name's Anne-Marie Petrov, and I'm the President and CEO at the Winspear Centre in Edmonton, as well as of the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra. And I have the pleasure of being the host for this next session entitled Designing the Ideal Cultural Experience, and we'll be bringing perspectives from the field. So we learned yesterday from the Culture Track study that the most popular cultural activities center around three core principles, and that these are also mirrored in the respondents' definitions of the ideal impact of culture. And these three were: 1, community; 2, connection; and 3, education. And the way they interpreted those was that community was a sense of belonging, that connection was around empathy, and that education was about providing perspective. They also identified, these respondents, that the ideal cultural experience was focused around 1, being social; 2, lively; and 3, interactive. And the study also further revealed that representation and inclusion mattered. So what is and who decides what a cultural experience is? On the premise that this is no longer one specific thing, how are people redefining culture as what they are doing? How are people consuming culture? Is the big institution dead? If not, what is its role? And what are the barriers to getting outside the bubble? How are some of us embracing the fear of taking chances? So today we have with us 4 outstanding arts leaders who will explore with us the question of how to design the ideal cultural experience, and specifically they will each, from their perspectives, varied disciplines and experience, respond to 2 prompts. And so to start off today, I'd like to welcome Kristine Germann, Programming Manager at the City Cultural Events with the City of Toronto, to address 2 prompts. Welcome, Kristine.
Hello, thank you for the warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here and to tell you a story about Nuit, Blanche, Toronto, and how its design cultivates diverse audiences. When Shannon Litzenberger and Sarah Diamond, who is the chair of our Artistic Advisory Committee, invited us to speak about designing an ideal cultural experience, they asked us to comment on 2 questions. How are audiences defining and engaging in cultural experiences? And what is the role of cultural institutions in defining cultural experiences? The answer to both questions might exist in the blurring of boundaries. Nuit Blanche is produced by the City of Toronto, and we are the only city of comparable size in Canada that produces large-scale events. The producing team has been in existence for over 25 years. Its structure has transformed over that time. The mandate has been to develop events that meet evolving council priorities and corporate objectives. At the top of this list has always been civic engagement and public benefit for the broadest possible audiences. Whether the events produced have been centered on sports, music, business, film, arts and culture events, whether the team has directly produced, co-produced, or facilitated the event, what is generally consistent is the event designs have been cultivated for mass audiences, free, and have been presented in civic and public space. This has developed the producing conditions that have defined Nuit Blanche Toronto. The event is a fusion of the exploration of the built environment, neighborhoods, hidden spaces and places across Toronto experienced in the magic hours between dusk and dawn, ephemeral and temporary public art in all its forms, a public celebration and urban cultural adventure, a shared social experience of public gathering in civic space, art that is free and accessible. Paris's Nuit Blanche, the founding Nuit event, was cultivated out of a collaboration with its municipal events and public art departments. This created a unique hybrid for a contemporary art event. Toronto operates with this model structurally and curatorially. We commission local, national, and international contemporary art creators and have also been engaging popular culture practitioners. Amongst the curators and artists are those who you would see presented in established international contemporary art events, the Venice Biennale, Documenta, or Sculpture Project Munster. But the event framework of Nuit Blanche is a fusion that draws its characteristics from many cultural activities that are both benchmark arts and not. It exists in the blurred edges of the boxes which define many of the cultural categories that we saw in yesterday's cultural track presentation. It operates with characteristics and qualities of art museums, public art, popular culture, music, and community festivals. Ipsos Reid has been conducting Nuit Blanche surveys since 2007, and their findings have been, in part, how the audience has been telling us how they engage in the Nuit cultural experience. The demographic is all-encompassing: families, young professionals, students and seniors, art aficionados, those new to the form, residents of the downtown core and the suburbs, artists, art students, professionals from the field, and out-of-town visitors. The audiences are a reflection of the diverse citizenry of Toronto. Nuit, however, continues to attract a younger audience, with 85% of the attendees 44 years old and under. Nearly two-thirds of these are 18 to 34 age range. 50% of the audience utilize event tools to pre-plan or navigate, and 50% of the audience follow the movement of the crowd and engage in a spontaneous cultural journey. 70% of the audience are frequent to sometimes attendees to cultural activities, and 30% are seldom or never attendees of cultural activities. 34% of audiences visit a cultural institution for the first time on Nuit Blanche, and more than half of these say they will return to visit that institution again. Toronto's cultural institutions in general report that they experience much larger audiences on the night of Nuit Blanche than on any other day in their programming calendar. The producing of Nuit is a collaborative endeavor of shared ownership, and the official program encompasses the City commissions of 4 to 5 exhibitions, a total of 30 to 55 artworks. This includes a more monumental exhibition or artwork that is commissioned for City Hall. The second part of the program, and participating annually, are approximately 60 major institutions and independent projects. These many partners are critical to the success of the event and its accessibility to diverse audiences. They allow the event to host and provide a wide selection of experiences for 1.2 million attendees. Many of our partners are at the summit, including OCAD University, Harbourfront Centre and the Power Plant, Toronto International Film Festival, the Aga Khan Museum, the Art Gallery of Ontario, the Royal Conservatory and Artscape. This multiplicity of partnerships creates the ideal cultural experience for the cultural omnivore described in the culture track data. The ability to choose a variety of options, each participant defining their experience uniquely from someone who attends the event. Much of the art we have commissioned has been inspired by relational aesthetics or relational art. This plays, tests the bounds, and blurs authorship. These interactive artworks require the engagement of the audience to realize the intent of the art and intentionally blur the boundaries of artist and viewer. Even if the artwork was not designed with the intent to operate in this manner, often how the audience engages with the work layers the art with interactive features. The event draws its personality and voice from the relational art framework. The event is an interactive social cultural experience. Toronto publics have embraced Nuit with curiosity and an openness to challenging new ideas, and as a call to action to participate and celebrate artistic creation. This has given the event unintended characteristics. An unexpected blurring of ownership and authorship occurs across the city every event night as hundreds of community-driven off-Nuit activities transpire. This is the unofficial event program. These are creative endeavors including and not limited to music and circusing buskers, pop-up installations, zombie walks, lightsaber battles, performance and dance interventions, intimate informal community and neighborhood-based events through to large professional exhibitions. How will Nuit blur boundaries in the future? Our sister event, Paris Nuit Blanche, has evolved from being a largely downtown art institution-centered event to moving to geographies outside the city centre. The 2018 edition of Nuit Blanche Toronto will see part of the event produced for the first time outside the downtown core in Scarborough, with local curator Alyssa Ferron and many Scarborough-based cultural partners, together cultivating new possibilities for the event. Some of our traditional institutional partners have also chosen to develop cultural initiatives as part of Nuit outside of their facilities and in Scarborough. The city's and Nuit Blanche Toronto's unique convening influence of bringing together partners, multi-divisional stakeholders, including the TTC, Transportation, Parks, Forestry and Recreation, Emergency Services, and Strategic Communications will shine a light on the Scarborough creative community and bring with it the public benefit of the event. By vividly moving the geography of the event, moving the walls of the temporary public art museum that we build in civic space, by changing and blurring its boundaries, we hope that this will invite in new creators, communities, and publics. Thank you, Messi.
Thank you, Kristine, and congratulations on your work. It's we've had one Nuit Blanche in Edmonton so far, and I have to say it was very, very, very moving and pretty spectacular event. So, to bring his perspective from the field, I'd like to welcome to the podium Brian Quirt. Brian is the artistic director of night swimming and the director of the Banff Playwrights Lab that's happening here in Banff at the Banff Centre right now. So, Brian, your turn.
Welcome to Banff, everyone. Artists are inherently practical, despite what you may have heard. I don't know any that focus on an ideal experience, though they, or we, I should say, often consider the ideal experience for each specific piece. And many of us are regularly unable to achieve it. Many, perhaps most in the performing arts, I work in theater, dance, and music myself, think deeply about audience and their response, or responses is more appropriate, and often struggle with how organizations define and constrain experience for them and their audiences. The Banff Playwrights Lab here at the Centre is in its 45th year. I'm the director of the lab and, as mentioned, also director in Toronto of the creation company Night Swimming. The lab this year has 50 artists here in residence over these 3 weeks from Canada, Australia, Denmark, the UK, and the US, including our esteemed playwright-in-residence, Janet Sears. Like you, our focus this year has been on audience, and it has been challenging and intriguing for me to simultaneously consider these issues from the artistic and organizational sides of the equation. At the lab, we've been focusing on two aspects in this realm. One, performing to audiences that are changing over time, from performance to performance during a run, from city to city for those who tour Canada. Audiences are changing, as many of you know, particularly in larger cities where they're getting more culturally diverse and where the age range is broader, at least in some venues. We're talking here about what it means to playwrights and to creators to hear their stories when the audience makeup changes from night to night or city to city, asking storytellers to think about who is this play for, which audience, can it play equally well in every city or every night? For example, the audience that my recent touring show experienced in Saskatoon was very different, particularly in terms of cultural diversity, to those experienced in Vancouver and Toronto. If an audience is primarily South Asian one night, what is different the next night when it is largely white? We've been talking here about who we imagine to be the audience for certain new works. Who do you imagine your audience to be, ideal or not? Did you imagine white people? The default audience that many artists and many organizations imagine is still a white audience. And if indeed that is true, what are we going to do about it? 2, we're also examining the ways that playwrights are incorporating audiences as participants into their new creations, something increasingly common, and a strategy that absolutely speaks to some of the areas in the report that was released yesterday, particularly fun, new experiences, and engagement. What follows are a few snapshots from the artistic perspective based on our conversations at the lab over the last few weeks. My favorite moment so far was during a session earlier this week when we gathered most of the lab participants together, when playwright Bea Pisano, artistic director of the Luna Theatre, a Latinx theatre company in Toronto, when asked to speak, as everyone was, about where audience sits in her landscape as a creator and a company, said, "The audience is the motherfucker." And as I thought about whether to use this quote or not, I too had to think a little bit about audience and how they, or rather you, would receive that statement, one that we in the room, all of us artists, knowingly laughed along with when it was shared by Bea. So a few snapshots. Welcoming is crucial. What are the strategies to welcome an audience, to make the experience personal and individual and therefore unique, to feel like an individual rather than part of an anonymous group? Food and drink, in other words, hosting, is an essential component. How and to what extent is food and drink available or incorporated into the event, and how is it related to the content of the show or performance? Welcoming and eating, as you all know, are at the heart of community and of gathering. Theaters tend to be static in their relationship to audience. The relationship is largely the same every night, kind of like this. I believe that theaters need to more actively explore how to make this static relationship more active and engaged, not with more e-blasts, although they're valuable, or ancillary activities, but actually in the room. Novelty is crucial. New relationships between artists and audience offer the possibility of deeper connection and therefore deeper exploration together of the content. Maiko Yamamoto, co-artistic director of Vancouver's Theatre Replacement, who developed a new piece here last week at the lab called Mine, calls it shared engagement, in which performance, community, sight, and engagement are built into the experience. And if anything sounds ideal to me, that might be it. And Maiko reminded us that presenters, especially at festivals, are very interested in engagement with audiences and often much more capable of providing it. And I certainly agree with her assessment about festivals based on my own experiences touring new works across the country. Increasingly, my company's projects are performance events rather than plays. The static audience-performance relationship is, of course, extremely well suited to certain stories and certain shows. But often, to be frank, they're boring, even to someone like me who has been addicted to theater since a teenager. Based on my recent experiences, intriguingly, museums are more interested and better able to incorporate deeply audience-engaged performance works. With Night Swimming, we've done shows recently at Victoria's Royal British Columbia Museum, the National Music Centre in Calgary, Calgary's Lougheed House, the Aga Khan Museum, and Fort York in Toronto, all of which embrace participatory works in and throughout their environment. These venues deal with audiences in much different ways than sit-down theaters, and my hope is that more theaters embrace more ways of creating, and therefore more ways of intersecting effectively and powerfully with audiences. Can museums and theaters, for example, learn from each other and the very different experiences they each provide, and both present more richly varied offerings that draw from the strengths of each? For a lot of performing arts organizations, engagement is put into ancillary events and activities rather than at the center of their core artistic work. Much of that core artistic work retains a conventional passive audience performance relationship. So the issue becomes how to engage with individuals during the arrival, the hosting, the departure, one might call it the customer experience, rather than through things such as talkbacks, which, although often invaluable, can often also seem like an offering of false intimacy and controlled engagement rather than free play and interaction. Many of the artists here working on works at the lab, and many of their works are being designed with the audience playing a more central role in the performance and the experience. This creates a challenge. Where do these works fit in terms of the theaters that have the highest capacity to bring them into contact with audiences, but are generally least able to accommodate because of their organizational structure perhaps, or indeed often because of their architectural structure, least able to accommodate performance events which require very different presentation strategies. Thus, these works tend to find homes in festivals by independent creators, where the ideal cultural experience can in fact be co-designed by the artists, creating the work in collaboration with the organization presenting it to the audience. One example being developed here during the lab, in fact I'll be going to that, a workshop of it this afternoon, takes place through and during and over a dim sum meal. Another by the UK company Fevered Sleep that we're working on here, called Grieving Things, or at least that's its working title, takes the form of a shop that people wander into to talk about grief and have the opportunity to buy products that were designed specifically for the show. Another UK company present here this week has among its many interdisciplinary elements aroma as a central creative tool, which I love. There's a show that is actually set, a theater replacement show that we worked on last week, that is actually set within the video game Minecraft, that spectators watch being played live in front of them by the creators and also by children that are invited from each community each night to participate in the show. We have an immersive musical in which the audience becomes members of a cult. My own company, Night Swimming, has developed a piece in which the audience becomes a choir every night. Another that takes the form of a salsa dance lesson in which everyone dances. And another in which, at the end, after the artists finish the performance and leave the room, the individuals present can either leave money to pay for their ticket or take money from a pile of cash that has been used in the show. How are audiences defining the experience? Audiences are demanding active experience rather than passive spectatorship, especially among younger audiences, as many of you know, but not by any means only among those. The lab put out a call for theater works in which audience involvement and participation is central to the event. We received lots of applications of all kinds. It's illuminating to me that playwrights are absorbing the expanding interest in audience engagement and imagining how they and their works can have more impact on their audiences. And I believe this is in part due to audiences' increasing demand for more activation. The question is, where do these works live? The audience, indeed, may be a mother, as Bea said, because the complexities of the invitation that we make to audiences are so rich, so elusive, and ever-changing. And that's what Bea was grappling when she said that. We craft an experience in the faith that, yes, I suppose it may be ideal, but ideal isn't really part of our vocabulary. We want it to be welcoming, compelling, moving, unavoidable, life-changing. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Lots of food for thought. I do think it would have been a better title for this session, don't you think? The audience is the mother? All right. T-shirt, that's right. All right, so now please welcome to the podium Graciana Kuba, who's executive in charge of programming with CBC Arts, to bring her perspective from the field.
Oh, thank you. I have a slightly more complicated system. Bear with me. So yes, I oversee arts programming at the CBC, and that entails some television, some grand television, but also overseeing a CBC Arts vertical. And that vertical is a platform that curates stories from across the CBC, from the regions, from the national, from wherever they're produced, but also in-house content that we produce. We have a little studio, and we produce video and articles, and we commission freelancers to come up with these beautiful stories that we place online. And we also produce a show called Cbc Arts Exhibitionists, and I'll let Amanda Paris explain what's on that show. We put it on television, but in fact it's a curated perspective of some of the best of what we've produced online throughout the week.
For two seasons, we have traveled coast to coast to coast, discovered the disruptors and innovators changing how we see Canada. Through movement, through image, through sound. Now we're back. It's our biggest season yet. More inspiration, more innovation, all Canadian. Welcome to CBC Arts Exhibitionists Season 3.
So what we intend and what we are is a conduit to bring Canadians closer to the most interesting, inspiring, and shareable art and artists. It's not strictly CBC News, but it is newsworthy and engaging. And in order to do that, we've decided that we need a set of filters and core values, and these are the values that we stick with. We are fresh, and fresh means highlighting artists who are disrupting the conversation. We are diverse. That means we're representing a broad and array of cultures, lifestyles, and art practices that are currently redefining the art landscape. We are distinct. That means we cover stories that some of our competitors won't or don't broach. And when we tackle big names, pop stars, grand artists, we try to do it in ways others won't or don't. We are irreverent. That means we respect artists that have lasted through the decades, but if they don't appeal to our audience, and this is a tough one, we won't cover them out of deference or obligation. We are where our audience lives. And for every story, we ask, will this story engage our core audience? And if it does not, then perhaps the next time we iterate with something different. So what we make as well are articles. It's not just video. For instance, this one was very popular, and artists left disposable cameras all over Toronto. This is the result. Another very popular one this week is a curation of a list, essentially, of 6 Indigenous films that you have to see that are free online. We collated them from the NFB and from other sources. So we collect and aggregate all of the articles dealing with arts across the country. And we also make videos in-house with the collaboration of independent producers. Canada's a Drag is particularly popular. Lourdes, the Mary Virgin in Edmonton, actually had a screening party with her posse and her people, and the other drag queens that we featured in this series did the same, creating a massive community of like-minded people that really enjoyed and wouldn't have really had this sort of opportunity to sort of come together. So it created a conversation and a collaboration. We also make TV shows. You just saw a little bit of what Exhibitionist does. Interrupt This program is an International Emmy Awards series, nominated series that looks at art scenes in cities that have experienced trauma or disarray, economic, political. We also have a filmmakers show. Of course, all of these programs have iterations online, and that's the key to the success of growing. Filmmakers this year will be all about women, 8 films by emerging filmmakers, and established as well, all women. We participate in live events, and we're thrilled to be able to do more of that. This was The Secret Path, Gord Downey's beautiful film in collaboration with animator Jeff Lemire. And following the broadcast and the streaming of this event, there was a grand discussion. You can see Jesse Wedty and Ryan Moran, Natasha Hubbard, and our own Melanie Hadley. And they conducted a conversation, and we had comments. 40,000 people contributing and collaborating, and that audience online is even growing as we speak. Other collaborations, we were at WAG last month, and there's our friend over here with curator Julian Agam, who was interviewed. We did a pop-up shop, and we broadcast the entire show out of WAG. With videos that we commissioned from an Indigenous company. We worked with them and produced essentially electronic press kits for all of these Indigenous artists that they can use and they can keep, and they're theirs forever and online on our site. This Artworks was a fun collaboration with OCAD and a collective of female filmmakers, and they did this sort of subversive social justice series that was quite controversial online. And below you'll see there's Creative Minds already in its second year, third iteration, where we collaborate with AGO, Massey Hall, and Banff Centre for Arts and Culture. Here we go. And it's been working quite well. And creativity, sorry, I slipped there. I'm going to show you another video. And we also produce these digital videos, these digital series that we commission with, from outside producers. They also have to respect our core values. We've narrowed all of this because in order to gain that audience, we have to give them exactly what they want.
Being an artist from a completely different cultural background, you have to deal with a lot of confusion. So in my art, the girl is often doing a facial expression like this.
So why this digital-first approach, and what does it look like? So all of this information, all of these videos, all of these articles, and the bits and pieces that we collect from the television shows, they all run on all of our platforms, on cbc.ca Arts, on our OTT over-the-top platform, on our CBC Arts YouTube, on our CBC Verticals, on CBC Indigenous. We collaborate a lot with them. This is where we live. This is sort of what it looks like. There's an Instagram page. There's a YouTube page. There's a Facebook page. And the content is iterated to fit each one of these platforms in a different way. The key is shareability and to get the audience where it is. This is a photograph that I took on the bus coming home just a few days ago. Every single person is tethered to their phones. We know now that changing consumption patterns are choosing how we choose to engage with the arts also. We know that the flight of a younger demo is forever now. They now live online. They're not going to come back to traditional TV. So we need to nurture and grow that audience, and we need to engage with niche audiences that are underserved and create these communities. We think that that's perhaps our mission and our job, to help create them when they want to be, of course, created. All of the research that we have and that we've spoken about over these last couple of days points to this. Underserved audiences need better representation. They're asking for it. People of color, LGBTQ+, Indigenous, marginalized, ethnic and artistic communities. They need to see themselves. And we're finding, and we're still working on sort of compiling the data, that digital stories are a conduit to live or increased interest and participation in live events. There's no surprise. The more you shine a light on wonderful content, the more people will be engaged and interested in perhaps going to see a live event. A key thing with online production is that it is much cheaper than legacy. So you can fail, and we fail often, and we figure out what works. So here is a representation of the sort of le palmarès of the big hits that we have now on YouTube. YouTube is a good way of gauging interest and seeing how things do, because people stay online on YouTube much longer. The ballet knows this because they have superstar Guillaume, who makes these wonderful videos that millions of people watch. But if you look at the sort of, there's a sort of a plethora of different kinds of content that is appealing to people, but what's performing really well are Indigenous stories, and this is an ongoing story for us. Social justice issues, stories like Straight Outta Karachi, about a rap band, really connects with the diaspora as well and with Pakistani communities here. So social justice issues, and then edgy, provocative stories, and wellness. Wellness is a big issue. Wellness and art therapy, sukkur. And at the very top, there's awesome and beauty. So those are themes that have come up again, and people do go online to just revel in nature and revel in the gorgeousness and revel in how wonderful the art can make us feel. Here's a few comments. Check out the last one. Jake Paul gets more subscribers in this amazing channel. Think about that. Society is lost. Little ha-ha. So I'll play another little video, because this is an area where we're also growing. Dance is popular, but not your ordinary dance.
The beauty about breaking is that it's really about having your own unique style. And considering my difference, I had to learn how to create movement on my own. Ill-ability is a term that I created about 10 years ago. The whole idea is to take the word disability out of the dictionary and replace it with ill-ability. You see, in hip-hop, what's bad is good. So when you see something you like, you say, yo, that's ill. And so ill-ability means incredible ability. And whether you have a disability or not, I personally believe that we all have a talent within us, but we're all unique and we all have something special to give to this world.
Sharing. Here's another video by a fellow here at Banff, formerly, Ella Cooper, who is a filmmaker and a photographer, and she co-produced this piece with our editor.
Canada's national identity and what that looks like, I often think of the Group of Seven, Moose, Canadian Mountie. Rarely do I see Black women depicted in the Canadian landscape. And so I became really interested in what would it mean to reclaim the Black female body in Canada? What does that look like from a Canadian perspective? I can relate to the people who say there will be dancing at my revolution. Over the last few years, I've been doing work on my own body to finally come up with a series which is really about reclaiming the Black female nude from a perspective that I call embodied elated resistance.
It's a longer piece, but we won't linger. You can go online to check out the rest of it. I think we're sort of a little bit running out of time, so I'll give you our sort of general learnings, what's working for us. The key is sticking to the values. If you write up those core values, you have to sort of stick with them. Listen, publish, iterate, and repeat. Do not be afraid to fail. Don't be boring. Serve the communities that need you, and build partnerships with like-minded allies. And revel in the niche. We found that this is an important thing. Find those niches and collaborate with them and create these communities that have been underserved. And then be of service to the awesome. That's always a good idea. Thank you.
Be of service to the awesome. Fantastic. I have such admiration for what you do, Grazyna, because you not only have the responsibility of capturing all of the arts and anticipating what people want to see, but also of being a voice for Canada. And that is no small feat. So thank you for your work. All right, our last speaker on this topic is the artistic director of Théâtre du Chatelet. Please welcome to the podium, Ruth MacKenzie.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an honor and an inspiration to be here, and I've hugely enjoyed getting to know you and hear about your priorities and your vision. And can I say, I'm an objective voice here. I've worked in 4 countries. I've worked with many arts funders. I think you are incredibly lucky with your arts funders and with their vision and their courage. It may not feel like that now, but in a couple of years, I think you'll see what a remarkable job they're doing for you. I'm not paid to say that. So, the Théâtre du Chatelet opened in Paris in 1862, and I'm the first woman to direct it, and I'm the first foreigner, so you can imagine how popular I am. It had a history of innovation. It's a 2,000-seat opera house right in the middle of Paris, but right from the start it tried to invent a new art form which it called operette for the working classes, for ordinary people, and introduced large-scale circus artists to reach out to find new audiences. So it started with populism at its heart. In the 20th century, it invited the Ballet Russe to be resident there. So it got Diaghilev, Stravinsky, Ravel, Debussy, Cocteau, Satie, you name it. They were there. And there, I guess, the takeout was innovation, was the invention of new art forms, but again at a big scale for 2,000 seats. And my predecessor, Jean-Luc Choplin, looking back at that tradition, has just introduced American musicals, which had never been seen in Paris, done at the highest possible level. One of them, An American in Paris, directed by Chris Wheeldon, the great choreographer, is playing right now in Toronto. So I'm in the ideal experience now, which is designing a cultural experience, but I haven't done it yet. And as you know, that's often the time when those ideal experiences look really, really good. So what I'm sharing with you is intention and ambition. We're closed for building works. We open next year. But we have, in fact, started our first experimental piece, so we can't work in the theatre. But we've got a piece called Bambino, which is aimed at an audience of 6-month to 18-month-year-old babies. And I'm confident in saying that this is a new audience for the Théâtre du Chatelet. It isn't playing in the theatre, it's playing in creches, in family centres, in libraries, in community centres round Paris, particularly in some of the most economically deprived arrondissements of Paris. And for me, in all seriousness, the symbolism of this first piece is very important, and it is about the values that we bring to the job as a new management, but also critically it's about the values of the City of Paris. So the City of Paris own our theatre, and they are our largest funder. 50% of our funds come from the City of Paris, the rest we have to earn ourselves. And for the City of Paris, their starting point for the Théâtre du Chatelet is very simple. Every single person who pays tax to the City of Paris is paying for the Théâtre du Chatelet. So what are we doing for every single person in Paris? And that's a very great challenge for us, and a very, I think, important start for how you begin to shape the ideal cultural experience, particularly when you're running an opera house, which, as we know from yesterday's presentation, is right there as the most unpopular art form, in the most unpopular sort of venue. So what are we doing? Well, Bambino perhaps gives a couple of signals. The babies in Bambino are on the stage with the singers and the musicians. There is no fourth wall. There is an absolutely clear sense in which every member of the audience is required to become a participant. They're absolutely free to laugh, cry, crawl, do whatever they wish. And that, for me, is a very important starting point. I don't think that anymore we can work in the world of audiences where we expect them to sit in rows and consume. I think that we're in the world where we are working with our communities and our citizens to develop activists, participants, artists, creators, who happen to be the people who also contribute to our income by buying some tickets every now and then. After Bambino, we're going to work with the choreographer Akram Khan, and he has created a piece, which in fact he created in London, we're reviving it in Paris, which is for 700 dancers, none of them professional. So 700 dancers are going to work with us in the 20 arrondissements of Paris and develop their own dance skills and at the same time learn their role in Akram Khan's dance, which then we will perform in a big public square right in the centre of Paris. And there, again, the values, I hope, are clear. So apart from encouraging community members, citizens of all ages who are keen on dance, they do have to be actually quite good at dance because Akram's work is world-class and very demanding, as well as encouraging them to become participants and actually to become the artists in our show. We're also encouraging people in Paris to come to a pop-up performance where they can see for free, and that's very important, a world-class artist with some world-class art. Again, I guess when you are closed, when your theatre is closed, you have the luxury of introducing yourself and experimenting with the people that might become your potential audiences, participants, artists. We've started a program of workshops with the Malian community in Paris, where we're developing with professional musicians from Mali and professional musicians from Paris what we're calling at the moment a Malian opera. It's a very, very bad title. We have to get better than that. But for us, this is the start of exploring with a particular community how we can create a large-scale popular form, which is inspired by a world-class cultural form, but also, of course, is addressing some quite urgent issues about the history of Mali and the history of France, not a history that that has the same obligation for truth and reconciliation that you are grappling with in your own contexts. And finally, my final example, all of this is happening this year in our closure period, is an artist from North America, Elizabeth Streb, an artist committed to developing the talents of young people, an artist who believes actually that everyone can fly. I can't quarrel with that. And she is doing a series of workshops for us with young people and with adults. In Saint-Denis, it's another particularly disadvantaged section of Paris. Actually, it's one of the places where the Olympic Games will particularly, they hope, benefit and raise the quality of life and life opportunities. But Saint-Denis is the home to a national circus school, so Elizabeth will be working with young people to develop their skills. And then we're going to be doing another free show for families, where the families can also learn some tricks, try out their flying skills, but they can also watch the professional artists, the world-class artists from New York, working with the young people who've done the workshops and interacting with the families who turn up on the day. For us, that's the start. It's an R&D in public for what will be our opening show in what I hope will be 2019. But it's a way, again, just to begin to share the values of how we would like to work with audiences. Our final example I just wanted to share, I'm not going to name the artist because I didn't ask his permission. It's a French rap artist, and he's developing also for us a new large-scale piece, which we're modestly calling the French Hamilton, because, you know, let's aim high again. But interestingly, one of the starting points for him and his project will be the moment you buy a ticket, the experience is going to start. So you don't have to wait to come to the theatre. You can start by getting work that we will be sending to you, sharing with you, work that you can interact with on your portable, on your mobile phone. And that's another area that for us is very important, that to get out of the 2,000-seat theatre, once we're back in that theatre, has to be something that we keep committing to. We keep committing to taking the art to work with and for the publics, the citizens, the participants that we're developing. And so this piece will be developed in the banlieue, in the suburbs of Paris, with workshops, again, with young people, by the rap artist. But the moment that we're on sale, anyone who wants to participate in the piece can begin to interact with it. And for us, it's not just that building, which, you know, we have to make porous, exciting, interactive. It's also the outdoor spaces that we have all around us in the centre of Paris, where we need to keep committing to doing free work that engages and interacts, and, of course, the digital dimension, work where we can create with artists, work that anyone enjoy anywhere in the world, actually. We've talked a lot in the last 24 hours about digital, and I just wanted to share one thought, which I haven't heard anyone say, so forgive me if you said it and I wasn't in the room. I think that one of the reasons that our publics are increasingly interested in being activists, artists, is because of the way they interact with the art that they experience every day. So everybody, with their own phone, you know, becomes a filmmaker, a photographer, a music editor, maybe a composer, maybe a poet, maybe a writer of some sort. But everyone is used to controlling that art. I hold the art in the palm of my hand. This is a very different relationship with the art than the experience you get if you sit in my very, very beautiful 2,000-seat opera house, where, as an audience member, I'm extremely little, and the spectacle on the stage is extremely large. I think we have to take seriously the way that this is changing not just our habits for accessing information, but really the way that we engage, the power that we have and that we feel we have over the art. This is enormously significant, and in the future is going to be at the centre of the way in which artists create with and for their public. That's my theory. I should just say, when you're looking for partners outside the box in digital, I'm here. Please. I'm really keen on Francophone and Anglophone projects. So I'm your ideal partner, and it's the internet, right? So that's okay. I guess for me, I come back all the time to the values, and the values are how we can change our relationship with our audience. We've heard a lot about it. I want to really push us back to think about how actually it's not just our donors where we want them to be our advocates, our partners, to share the process. It's every single person that interacts with us. And lowest financial level, the lowest level of donors, they are our ticket buyers. And I really believe that we need to find a way in which those audiences become as active and as loved, as cherished as our big donors. Because I think that's where the revolution maybe begins to start in our relationship. One of the very humbling things about Paris is, of course, it is a real home for revolution. And one of the interesting features about the revolutions that Paris has hosted is that the foreigners that go there to start them off, almost without fail, come to a very sticky end pretty fast. But notwithstanding that, well, you know, it's true. And history never lies, as we know. Notwithstanding that, one of the things that we're trying to start is a 10-year plan, because we know that real revolution, real change, it takes 10 years. And sticking to the world of the digital for a moment, one of our starting points has to be the democratic deficit. So we heard yesterday about the idea of an illegal cultural institution, that is to say, a cultural institution that doesn't really have the right to do the work it's doing. So I'm funded by the Ville de Paris, but of course, my boss, the mayor of Paris, she's got the democratic endorsement. She's been voted for. No one's voted for me. No one at all. No one's voted for me. No one's voted for my values. No one's voted for my program. So how do we take seriously that democratic deficit? What are the ways, now that we have these great tools at our disposal, that we can really actually begin to test whether the citizens that we're here to serve believe in the good job that we're doing, whether we are in fact delivering what they want, whether we are in fact inspiring, changing lives, provoking, addressing the urgent issues, doing the things we all believe in? Well, I'd like to start by setting up some digital town halls. I don't see why we can't do some real debates, actually, in the real town halls around Paris with our real audiences and potential audiences. But wouldn't it be interesting if we could also begin to create a digital tool that really was interactive, that really enabled us to test some of our ideas in a meaningful way, in an interactive way, in a long-term way, in a long-term experiment? And I'd love it if there was anyone who wanted to be a partner, because how interesting it would be to test the idea of a democratic deficit campaign in more than one community around the world at the same time. So a couple of thoughts just to throw out. And in all seriousness, if the takeaways for me, of the key values that we need to develop with and for our audiences have been social justice and interaction, the other good word was fun. And I can't think of more fun than trying to have a new revolution in Paris. Anyone who wants to join me, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Lots of food for thought. It is 11 o'clock, but I do want to allow a couple of minutes for questions. So I see a question right there. I don't know if there's a microphone to hand to Alex Pryor. Where are we? Here? Coming up. Perfect.
Thank you very much for all the very interesting thoughts and some amazing projects that are going on, which is very inspirational. I want to pose something, I guess, to all of you, especially in connection with the CBC presentation, but for all of you. And I don't necessarily, I'm being a little bit of a devil's advocate just now. A lot of what's been said today had to do with directly and quickly responding to audience needs, unless I've misunderstood. I even wrote down some quotes. If our audience doesn't like this, we should do it. Or if the audience doesn't like the artist, that's what it was. We drop them. We're irreverent. We drop the artist. Is that really the role of art? Or as a young person, I've always seen the role of art as a way to form tastes and form society even and our values, not necessarily to respond to them. Of course, a bit of both. But yeah, so I wonder. I think back to my childhood, and I just went to everything that was on in London and elsewhere, regardless of whether I thought it was good or I wanted it. And often I thought something would be complete rubbish because I was a silly child, and it turned out to be great. And had that audience, even when I was in my early 20s, responded to my taste, had the arts producer, the theatre or the artist or the TV company responded to my taste, I think it would make the city worse off, but also my life worse off, because I would have been listened to, and that would be very silly and daft. So I wonder if as artists, as art producers, as art creators, as forums for art, we should always, or even often, respond so quickly to audiences wanting, something on their handheld or something. I mean, people say that, but would they not benefit more in the end from actually having what they think perhaps they don't want, but in fact would enrich their life? I'm saying that with some caveats. I'm trying to be a bit of a devil's advocate here. Thank you.
Excellent question. Who wants to take it?
I'll start. So I'll be the devil's advocate for a moment and say I really would push back at the idea that things that you consume on your mobile are necessarily, not great art or not serious. And I honestly, I think that a 10-year plan involves, giving away some power, opening the doors to debate, but it doesn't involve quotes, doing what the public wants necessarily. It involves being honest and open, transparent with your values, unpacking your values and your tastes, and really honestly questioning whether I am the best person to develop a large-scale Malian opera. Maybe, just maybe, the Malian residents in Paris and the Malian musicians know more than me. I know it's really hard to believe. But actually, I think that there is no distinction in my mind between having a curatorial expertise, and having taste and experience and knowing how to get something done, but giving away some of that power to share with your partners, your funders, your donors, and your citizens, the people that you are there to serve. There's a great guy, a TV producer who worked with Dennis Potter, the great British experimental TV playwright, and he said, "Don't give the public what they want; they deserve better." And that, I think, is entirely reconcilable with the approach that we have been discussing. So we are developing and sharing new approaches with new artists and with new audiences. We have our standards and our values, and that's the thing that we come back to. But the return is not immediate. The return is 10 years down the road.
Sure. We're just narrowing the focus. We're not rejecting. We're just narrowing the focus in order to grow the brand and grow that community and those communities around them. And there's so much out there that you have to be curators. And we've chosen this path. It's an experiment. We'll see what it augurs. So it is a bit of a provocative statement, but it means that another series that has already been online, that already exists somewhere else, we're not going to repeat that. We're going to try something new, and we'll follow the lead of the communities that haven't had their own series and that haven't had representation. So it is a bit provocative, but in the plethora of sort of content that exists, you have to take a path, you have to take a road, and that's the one online with this small vertical that we've decided to take as an experiment for now. And we'll see whether the numbers support us and whether those audiences grow. Right now they are. We're growing year by year. And in that sort of sweet spot demographic, mostly women, 25 to 34. And on YouTube, in fact, many more men are coming on board. That's appealing. That's what we have to do. We have a very old audience on television, not very old. We have an older audience on television, and the average age is 50, 55. Radio is 59. No, oh no, okay, no. That was super mean. But no, the younger audiences are just not there, and so in order to get them, you have to deliver something that they're going to be responding to. No.
That's a good question, too. It is really around the question of, life imitates art. And how much is this now becoming a sort of iterative process? That's a question. I don't know. All right. Is there another question right back there?
Hi. Ruth, I was really excited to hear about the very interesting collaborations that you are doing between different communities in Paris who have not necessarily been engaged with your theatre. And in Canada, we see there's an incredibly vibrant scene when it comes to community-engaged works. It tends to be a lot of smaller organizations doing community-engaged arts works. But we also, and I see increasingly larger institutions interested in taking that approach. But I've also observed often these communities have a history of organizations parachuting in and parachuting out and not really there for the long term and the long-term benefit of those residents. And that really, it serves to kind of replicate the colonial relationships that many of those communities have experienced. So I'm just wondering how you go about doing this kind of work in a non-exploitive way, and what is the benefit in the long term for these communities who haven't been engaged with you before?
Yes, very good question and very important points. And I completely agree with you. I think one of the big dangers is exactly replicating that colonial practice. And that's why for us a 10-year plan is really important. And of course the first project, you parachute in. But of course the most important thing is you don't parachute out again. I think that it is a challenge, and it's a challenge everywhere I've worked. It's easier in cities that have a cohesion amongst themselves at city level, where people do believe themselves to be Parisian, or to come from Nottingham, or to come from Glasgow or Manchester, other places, or Vienna, other places where I've worked, Amsterdam, so that where there is in fact it's not just a local community, there is a city-wide sense of community, even if that has not been activated. But I won't deny it is a challenge. I've got one lovely project which involves working in every swimming pool in Paris with Vietnamese water puppeteers in order then to invite families to a Canadian piece of work by Robert Lepage that is also playing right now in Toronto, the Nightingale and Other Fables, which, for those that haven't seen it, involves putting an orchestra on the stage, flooding the orchestra pit, putting the singers in the orchestra pit up to their waist, and then requiring them to manipulate Vietnamese water puppets, as you do. But for me, the serious point is it's one of the best pieces I've seen in 10 years, easily, and I would love any family that goes to a swimming pool but may never have been to the opera to give it a go, because I know that they'll love it, and they'll love it even more if they've done a Vietnamese water puppet workshop, so they know exactly what's going on. What's my follow-up project for that? I don't know. So, I'll be honest. So I've got a couple of years to figure it out. But of course, you can't just start a program in swimming pools, which is, by the way, a fantastic venue with almost no thresholds for any member of the community, and then just stop. So you've got to carry on. And any ideas, actually, gratefully received. We're not starting this one until 2021, so I've got time to think of a good idea. But I'm very alert to the danger that you bang on someone's door and say, look, I'd love to be your friend, and then you just go away and you never see them again.
It's time to wrap up. I'm sure there are more questions, but I think we're all available for more questions after informally. So I want to thank Ruth, Kristine, Brian, and Grazyna for your presentations today. And just remember, the audience is the... Thank you.